Let's see, let's go live on Instagram here. Last weekend, I went to the Napa Valley Asian American Film Festival. And this is only the second year that it was on. I missed the first year though, which I'm sad about. There was a movie I wanted to see. But I was able to see 3 of the movies here. And for those who are watching on other platforms, right now I'm streaming on my phone to Instagram, and then I think to my Facebook page, and then YouTube. I was trying to stream to Substack, but still having issues with it. So we'll figure it out eventually. But I want to talk about storytelling lessons I picked up from the movies I watched at the Napa Valley Asian American Film Festival. If you are watching on Instagram, if you hop over to my Facebook page, Coach Gail Knott, or YouTube, which is just at Gail Knott, you can see what I'm sharing here on the screen. And I'm just sharing the website. So the 3 movies I watched were, and let me switch screens over here. The first one was Rental Family, and that is a Japanese movie featuring Brendan Fraser, who plays an American actor living in Japan. And I'll just read the summary here. Set against modern-day Tokyo, Rental Family follows an American actor, Brendan Fraser, who struggles to find purpose until he lands an unusual gig, working for a Japanese rental family agency, playing stand-in roles for strangers. As he immerses himself in his client's worlds, he begins to form genuine bonds that blur the lines between performance and reality, confronting the moral complexity of his work. He rediscovers purpose, belonging, and the quiet beauty of human connection. It stars Brendan Fraser, Takahiro Hira, Mari Yamamoto, and Shannon Gorman. And then the filmmaker is Hikari, and she had filmed a introduction to the movie, and that was played on the screen. And there's more info on her on the website. So that was the first one I watched, was Rental Family. The second one I saw was Rosemead, and I believe this had already opened and playing in theaters for about a month. This movie was produced and stars Lucy Liu, and it's based on inspired by a true story, is the words that they use. So Rosemead is set in the heart of the San Gabriel Valley and based on a harrowing true story. Rosemead is a gripping, emotionally charged portrait of a mother's love pushed to its limits. Lucy Liu delivers a transformative performance as a terminally ill Chinese immigrant who uncovers her teenage son's disturbing fixation with mass shootings. As her health deteriorates, she takes increasingly desperate and morally complex measures to protect him and to confront the darkness he's drawn to. Urgent and unflinching, Rosemead wrestles with themes of identity, mental health, and the immigrant experience in America, capturing the dissonance between cultural expectation and personal crisis. At a time when questions around gun violence, parenting, and belonging feel more pressing than ever, this powerful film resonates deeply, offering a rare and necessary lens into the quiet tragedies unfolding in communities too often overlooked. And it stars Lucy Liu, Lawrence Shu, Orion Lee, Jennifer Lim, Madison Hu, and James Chen. And the filmmaker is Eric Lin. I'll go more into each film. I'm not going to give any spoilers. I'm going to stick with the descriptions that are published and talk more about the storytelling themes. The last film I saw was Diamonds in the Sand. Now, I wish I could have watched the whole film festival. I wish I could have watched every single movie, but with a disabled daughter, it's just difficult. Even though I have childcare and it's with a trusted person who my daughter loves, I'm still that person's safe person. That when I'm away, she is dysregulated. She even told me the other week, what did she say? She was stressed. I just feel so bad. It's just so heartbreaking. Well, It's so heartbreaking that a 6-year-old understands the word stress. And unfortunately, there are many children who are experiencing that in this world right now. Stress and beyond. But she was feeling stress. She feels stress when I'm away. So I would see a movie, come back, stay with her for a few hours, and then go see another movie, and so on. So the third movie I saw was Diamonds in the Sand. And I have the program with me too, so I wanted to also kind of show in here. So Rental Family is this one. For those who aren't seeing the screen share, I miss one of the things I missed. Though I probably would have saw the other movie, but there was a panel featuring actors and one of the showrunners for the show Chief of War. But I would have loved to see Brandon Finn. I missed it. Okay, so Rosemead was the second movie I saw. And the third movie is Diamonds in the Sand. And that was the closing movie and ended with a Q&A with the filmmaker and the lead actress. So Diamonds in the Sand is about a divorced salaryman Yoji has just buried his mother in Tokyo. With few meaningful relationships left, he comes to grips with the realization that he has nothing to live for. A chance encounter with Minerva, a Filipina migrant worker who appears to sense his sadness, urges him to see his situation in a new way. A former nightclub entertainer, Minerva now works as a caregiver to provide for her only child in the Philippines. When Yoji discovers the decomposing corpse of his neighbor, an old man whose name he does not know, the death is ruled a kodokushi, or the lonely death. Unwilling to meet the same fate, Yoji throws caution to the wind to follow Minerva to Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. In Manila, Yoji meets Angel, Minerva's conflicted 21-year-old daughter. A Japino rejected by her Japanese father, she finds herself at a crossroads post-graduation. Like Yoji, Angel has also just witnessed death, but the kind that's taking over the seedy parts of Manila. For all its drawbacks and discomforts, the chaos of the unfamiliar city offers Yoji the promise of life, human connection, and the unpredictable destiny, anything but the dark, silent certainty of Kodokushi. Starring Lily Frankie, Maria Isabel Lopez, Solomon Cruz, Kazuko Yoshiyuki, and Charlie Dizon. So the people who were at the Q&A after the movie were the filmmaker Janice Victoria, who is born and based in Manila, and the lead actress Maria Isabel Lopez, who happens to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and she has an art show coming up in Petaluma. So you can check out her Instagram. It's Beauty Queen MIL. And she said she would be posting when her art show will be. But anyway, about the films. Now that I'm thinking about it, there is a chance I may give some spoilers. So light spoilers ahead. And let me go back to maybe the festival page. Do we have that? Or is this the program? Oh, that's just the description. But I don't, well, maybe I will show the films. We'll see. Let's go back to, just so I have them ready, I'll go back to the films page. So these were all the films that were shown this year at the Napa Valley Asian American Film Festival. Okay, so there were three themes that I wanted to just highlight. Actually, no, more than three. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Six themes that I wanted to highlight from these movies of storytelling lessons from them. One is inspiration. Were all three movies inspired by real stories? Let me think about this. The Rental Family definitely is. The filmmaker saw an article, I believe, about the cleaning people, and actually has a prominent scene in the movie, are the people who clean after a death. Uh, and there's a reason why that stands out so much. I'm not going to go into because I think that could be a bit of a spoiler. So she saw an article about the cleaning people after someone dies, and it's a what's the word again? Kodo. Let me just make sure I say it right. Funny, but the movies listed in here, I don't know if they're in the order they were played. Yes, here. Okay. Oh, it doesn't have the word in the printed program, but it does on the website. Oh no, I'm thinking of something else. So Rental Family is inspired by real life. There are companies in Japan where you can hire someone to act as someone in your life. There was a few examples that they showed in the movie, but let's say, this is a bit of a trope in American films, but let's say you wanted to hire someone to be a date. You're going to a wedding or a reunion, and you don't want to go by yourself. You can hire someone to play your date. So you could do this in Japan, and there was all sorts of scenarios where that was happening. So that is based on real life. Rosemead, I mentioned, is inspired by a true story or based on a true story, depending on the description that was written. This is a very sad one. That was a heavy film. I knew what was going to happen because I knew of the story, what had really happened, and I knew it was coming. So that was based on real life. And then also the last film, which is Diamonds in the Sand, that was based on an article about the cleaning people. And this is based on an article about the cleaning people after a kodokushi, or the lonely death. It's kind of graphic, and I can see why this would stand out. But the point is, all three of them were inspired by true life. And as you're sharing your story, obviously it's your life or your business, it's going to be shared. You're sharing from truth already. If you are storytelling and you're sharing someone else's story, or maybe you're storytelling in your marketing and it's about maybe it's someone else's experience, again, you're using that inspiration. But still, with the movies, they're fiction. Some fiction. Rosemead, based on a true story. I'm sure there's a lot of speculation of what could have happened and the conversations that were had. But for the other two, those are fictional movies based on reality. So as you are sharing your stories about your business and sharing stories through marketing, you may have to change some details so that you're not giving everything away, depending on the privacy issues in your industry. Well, I just found that kind of interesting, is that there's always, if you ever feel like you have nothing to say, we are experiencing life every day. And there's a couple of techniques you can do to kind of start capturing those stories that you have in your work. One is that the questions that your clients ask you is just note them down. Questions that other people ask you about your work, note them down. Those are possibilities. Other inspirations for stories could be, I think people always think about like the highlights in their story, like the most amazing thing that happened to you. But I think there's a lot of lessons to share when you share the boring, the mundane, the ordinary aspects in your life. There were details in all of these movies that just gave you more insight into a person, into how they lived. For example, in Rental, I'll go back to Rental Family, just how I don't think he ever cooked. I think he would always get food from the convenience store. Is that Rental Family? No, that's not Rental Family. The little detail. So the little detail in Rental Family would be the clue to who Brendan Fraser's character was as an actor. There was a little hint of it at the very beginning of the movie when you're in his apartment. There is the little clues of what's something like really ordinary that happened in the movie of him commuting and sitting in the subway and what he would see in the subway. There are clues to the messiness of his apartment in the beginning of the movie. What does that mean when we're so despondent, when we're depressed, when we're feeling hopeless, and how our environment reflects that? So those are just like little clues. And when we share those, even in our verbal storytelling, you're painting that picture verbally or written if you're writing it out. Because the people I work with aren't filmmakers, but we are sharing stories through our social media, through our writing, and maybe you're making videos too, but you're not making a full-length movie. So look for those ordinary things that are happening in your life. Think of the highlights, but also think of what was the most boring thing that happened today? What was the most boring thing that happened this week in my work or with my clients? If that's the kind of storytelling that you're doing. The next thing I want to share is timeline and how these 3 different movies played with timeline. For Rental Family, it was all chronological from starting with the present on. However, I mentioned there was a clue at the very beginning. So there was a clue to who Brendan Fraser was as an actor at the very beginning. And when he was recognized, there was a little flashback, very fun, amusing flashback to him as an actor and what he was successful in. And there were also, actually, there were a couple other clues to who he was an actor, and that kind of shows later on too. But mostly it was here I am now, and then moving forward, and that was the story. So that's one way to share a story, is present to, or near present to future. Next is the flashbacks, and that's with Rosemead. So Rosemead, it's interesting how neither of the descriptions on the website or in the printed program talk about mental health and the stigma around mental health, especially in the Asian American community or Asian communities. So the timeline shared in Rosemead, just thinking about the opening scene. The opening scene probably could be interpreted a couple different ways. I'm not going to go into it because I think that's a spoiler. But the opening scene probably could be interpreted in a couple different ways. And then it starts in the present and then moves forward, but there are flashbacks shared in her son's, through her son's mental health. He starts remembering things, whether it's while he's having challenges or during a therapy session. You will have these memories, and then they're presented as flashbacks. So that's something that you could play with your storytelling, is if you're telling a story, how do you want to present context? Do you want to start at the very beginning and then move forward? Or do you want to start, here I am now, or near now, recent past, and then you start moving forward, and then you could go back in time and give a little bit more context. give the backstory to the situation, which is kind of what Rosemead did through his memories. Next is what is it? Diamonds in the Sand. Let's put that on the screen. This is interesting. This also starts in chronological order. I'm trying to think if there were any things in the past, if there were any flashbacks. Not that I can remember. Now, I watched all these movies only once. I would love to watch them again so I could dive in deeper. But for Diamonds in the Sand, the timeline for this was, okay, starting now and then moving forward, but something that they did was they skipped time a lot in the beginning. The movie started before COVID, before the pandemic, and then through COVID, the COVID pandemic, and they would just, the next scene, you didn't really know how much time had passed. You could kind of just guess based on if people were wearing masks, if he was able to visit his elderly mother who lived in a care home, if he was even allowed to touch her or be in the same room as her. And so that was an interesting way to play with timeline, was to skip. And not necessarily having to express how much time had passed. And then once we get to her death, then I believe it's mostly day by day. However, again, there's still a little bit more skipping. Again, I don't know how much time has passed, and maybe it doesn't really matter. So something to play with in terms of your storytelling is how do you want to, where do you start in the story? How much content, text, or backstory do you give yourself? And that can also depend on how much time you're giving. And then if you want to play with flashbacks or going back and coming back forward, or even how much do you want to, or how often do you want to skip time? So if you start chronologically, do you go 5 years later, 10 years later, or months later, so on? Oh, it just depends on the story. I'm going to just go through the next four kind of fast, because these I'm still kind of working on, marinating on what these themes mean in terms of each movie. One was the comparison and contrast. That was very obvious in Diamonds in the Sand because we start in Japan, we start in Tokyo, and then we go to Manila. There was a comparison and contrast between culture, between between isolation and loneliness versus being with a huge group of people and never being alone. If you can guess which cultures are those, between Japanese and Filipino cultures. Even the environmental noise contrast was interesting. When he was in Tokyo and outside visiting his mom, it was all trees and quiet, and you hear nature and very calming. Whereas when he was in Manila, in a very crowded part of Manila, visiting Minerva, how loud it was, how urban it was, and the constant noise, even to the point where it would affect his sleep. So that was comparison and contrast was very evident in that movie. Let's see, was it evident in Rental Family? Rental Family? Maybe. In terms of the different families and people, his clients that he would work with, maybe that would be a comparison contrast. There's another way to show comparison contrast in Rental Family, but it would be a spoiler. I don't want to share that one. If any of you have seen any of these movies, I would love to chat more about them. So I can go on about the symbolism and the lessons, but I don't want to give everything away, or anything away, actually. But there was some comparison and contrast. You can find that in the Rental Family. And then with Rosemead, for comparison and contrast, there could be a comparison between how the mother's true friend treated her versus other people in the community. There could be comparison and contrast with, and so for those joining on Instagram, hello, I'm talking about movies I saw at the Asian American Film Festival in Napa. So in Rosemead, the comparison contrast could be between how her true friend treated her versus other people in the community when it came to death, when it came to mental health. It was quite hurtful what other people in the community would say to her regarding those things, and then regarding her, and then comparing that to what her friend would say. And then with, what was the last one? Oh, I mentioned Diamonds in the Sand was very obvious with the comparison and contrast between Japanese culture and Filipino culture, and the differences between Tokyo versus Manila. I mentioned Rental Family a little bit. There's a little bit there, but it would give too much of a spoiler. I'm not going to share that part. The other theme I saw was, of course, emotional connection. You got to have that. I feel like that's necessary. No one's going to be interested in the story if they don't feel connected to it. And if they're not, it doesn't mean you're necessarily a bad storyteller. I think it's more just maybe they just don't connect to the emotion. And that's okay. I think there are general emotions that as humans we can all relate to. For example, with Rental Family, we can all relate to loneliness. We can all relate to feeling lost, feeling like we lost our purpose. What in the world am I doing in this world? You know, how can I not necessarily get ahead, but be able to do what I love and be able to support myself, make a living through that. So I think we can all connect to those themes. I really connected to the connection that he felt with his clients of, I have a big heart for the elderly, for our elders, and to think that they are alone and not being heard as their body and their mind are aging and they're not able to have that freedom like they used to have. That's, to me, that's so painful. So I definitely felt that emotional connection. For, let's see, what was the other one? Rosemead. Very emotional movie. Definitely would feel that emotional connection. For Rosemead, I mean, I don't think you can help but connect to a parent who is willing to do everything to help their child, to dealing with a death in the family. There's so much there. Dealing with the pain of being ostracized by your community to the point where you want help, but you don't know how to get it because there's so much shame around it. And then lastly, with Diamonds in the Sand, the emotional connection there. Again, loneliness. Yoji is divorced. And his friends were her friends. So he didn't have any friends anymore because of that. And then someone who was very close to his mother passes away. So those are all things we can connect with. We could even connect with Minerva's daughter, who is just graduating and finding herself at this crossroads where her mother is encouraging her to immigrate to Japan. And she's like, what? I didn't go to school so that I can be a caregiver. She has her own dreams. But when you have a parent who wants you to just play it safe, it can be challenging to work with that. They didn't really dive into that part of her story because the story was more about Yoji and a little bit about Minerva. But it does touch on that. So as you're thinking about your stories and emotional connection, when it comes to marketing your business, this is where marketing can get icky, is if we are trying to manipulate people, trying to say your life or your business isn't going to be better if you don't use my services or buy my product. I think with the true emotional connection is you go to your why. Why do you do this? Why does it light you up? Why do you feel passionate about it? And share that. Share your why, share stories about the people you help, or share stories about why if you had used the services and or products like you have, hopefully you have, share how it's made a difference for your life. That's where you're going to find that emotional connection is sharing those stories, and not so much about the features. I think people get hung up on, here are all the aspects of my business. I have a client who specializes in live streaming events. They also do videography, they also do photography, and so on. And it would be so easy to say things like, we have 2 or more cameras to film your event, we have a drone, we have the licensing for the drone, we have satellite internet so we can live stream your event, no problems. It could be so easy to talk about that, but what they can talk about, and this is what I'm working with them on, is sharing the emotional connection to why these features are so important. Because there are people who cannot make it to your event live. And especially if it's a fundraising event for disabled people, we want to be able to share this and share, to bring our community together, whether or not they're able to physically be here. We want to give them an experience as almost as if they were here, to know that they matter to us, that they're important, and we want to capture those stories for you. So that has the emotional connection versus going with, oh, I do this, we do that, we have this. And that's so important when it comes to storytelling and sharing what you do, how you help people. One more theme I saw in all 3 movies was the art of the pause. I have a friend, Elaine, who is very big about sharing the benefits of the pause and how this is so important, especially in this fast-paced world, and we're inundated with information and all the stuff going on in the world, how important it is to pause, to ground, to reflect. And I would say all 3 movies, I have to think about each one, but all 3 movies, there were a lot of times where it was just quiet. And it gives you the opportunity to feel that connection, the emotional connection. Gives you the opportunity to really live in their world, because you hear the environmental sounds, you see what they're seeing. For rental family, those moments of pause were when he was sitting in the subway, for when he was alone in his apartment, maybe traveling on a train. But those are all moments of pause that they shared in the rental family. For Rosemead, the moments of pause, there were scenes at a motel. Sometimes there was music, sometimes there wasn't. And the scene was played in slow motion. Excuse me. So even though it wasn't a completely silent or completely non-action, nothing happening, it still gave you this touch point into their lives. And it was a moment to pause and to connect with who and what is important to them. That's when I felt the most pause in Rosemead. In Diamonds in the Sand, there was a lot of quiet reflection in this movie. Again, him being alone in his apartment, him getting food by himself, visiting his mother, going to the beach. And those are all times that we can use in our lives as well. But in our storytelling, when we share something really impactful and meaningful, that's the time to pause and slow down. Everyone joining. I'm also streaming to YouTube and Facebook. My Facebook page, Coach Gail Knott, or YouTube at Gail Knott, if you want to see what I'm sharing on the screen. But I can share here too. Talking about storytelling lessons from independent films that I watched at the Napa Valley Asian American Film Festival. I'm actually about to finish up here. But I mentioned inspiration. They were all inspired from real life. One of them was a documentary filmmaker. And even though we are sharing inspiration from our work and our business, we may also take inspiration from people we've helped, from other stories in the industry. I'm sharing inspiration from films, which kind of has nothing to do with marketing, sort of. I have some input on how they can market the film festival. If anyone has a connect into there, I'd be happy to help. But one theme was inspiration. The other one was how they played with timeline, whether you start from the beginning and then move forward. Do you play with flashbacks? How do you share context and backstory in your storytelling when it comes to marketing? Comparison and contrast. I think that one's often talked about in marketing. Emotional connection, of course. We're not just sharing features. We are connecting. And through our storytelling, when you talk about real people and real transformation that's happening, there's going to be an emotional connection there. And then lastly, the art of the pause. In Instagram or Reels or TikToks or Shorts or whatever, I tend to edit out pauses for my clients because you want those videos to be short and punchy. But sometimes it's okay to leave the pause in. It's okay to share something impactful and then let that sit in. Because how all of these work, all of these social media platforms work, as soon as the video is done, as soon as the reel is done, it moves on to the next. And they may forget, maybe, of what you had just said. So if you allow some pausing in there, if they are meant to hear it, if they're drawn to what you're saying, they will watch the whole thing or read the whole thing. Got the captions on, hopefully. That's the thing about this live. It needs captions, needs live captions. So use the pause effectively, whether it's speaking, whether you're making shorts or making a full video. Even when you're writing, there are ways to space out your writing with lots of line breaks so that people can sink into what you are sharing, and you'll build that emotional connection as you're sharing that pause. If you're watching just now, feel free to head over to the recording. I'll leave it up on Facebook and YouTube. Instagram, I'm not quite so sure if I'll leave it up because it'll be a long video. But those were my storytelling lessons from Napa Valley Asian American Film Festival. Let me know if there's anything I can share, whether it's short little tips in terms of sharing your message or longer ones. And let me know. This is a little different for me. This is something I like to do, watch, read in my free time. And this is the first time I actually thought about, well, how am I actually bringing this into my work? If I am, I don't have to. One of the things I started doing was creating a media journal, and this is why I learned it from Reels and Shorts, was actually sitting down and writing. If I watch a video, read a book, read an article, to actually sit down and reflect with it. What I learned from it, how would this apply in my life? Do I agree with it? Do I disagree with it? So I've started doing this, not with everything I watch and read, but I'm starting to do it more and more, and this allows me to sink in, reflect, to pause, and not consume so much, because otherwise you're just like scrolling and stuff. And there are now studies saying that scrolling actually affects your cognitive abilities. We can go more into that if that's a possible topic we want to look into. Thanks for joining me live. I will see you guys next week.